Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Tech on Fire podcast and video cast. My name is Rose Ross, and I'm the founder and the chief trailblazer at the Tech Trailblazers, which is an awards for tech startups. And I'm delighted that we are doing a podcast series with our friends at GigaOm and talking today to Michael Azoff, who is very much in the AI space. So I am delighted to welcome you, Michael, to Tech on Fire. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Rose. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. It was great to have you here. And AI is a big topic. We introduced the category to the awards probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's grown in popularity. And I know that's not going to be a surprise to you, Michael, but for people who don't know you already, it'd be great to get a little bit of a background on you and what your beat is from a GigaOm perspective and the kind of things that you're going to be keen to chat about.
Sure. So I go back many, many years, as you can probably tell from my lack of hair. Where I got interested in AI actually after that winter in AI that people talked about in '86, when backpropagation was a way of training the deep layers in neural networks. So I know this is getting very technical, but up to that point, neural networks, which was a branch of AI, were very simple. And that breakthrough allowed some very deep and complex type of neural networks to be played with. So that drew me into it. I was doing research in solid state electronics, so I had that background in academia, and I got drawn into neural nets, and I spent quite a bit of time working with neural nets and using them for forecasting, and I wrote a book on the topic. So that was the era that I was deep into that. And then I went and did other things, and then in the last 18 years, I've been working as an analyst at Informa, and then more currently at the moment at GigaOm. And when I saw that deep learning had erupted with the use of accelerators at NVIDIA's GDC conference, that really sparked my interest again, and that drew me to covering AI as an analyst. So that I spent a lot of years there, but AI has been a thread throughout my interests, and I do other things as well. Let's talk about AI.
Yeah, let's talk about AI, because that gets into my burning question. And I said I only had one question for you. I may have been lying, but this is going to be my first only question. For me, I've found that people tend to use AI, machine learning, deep learning quite interchangeably. You can see them appearing, slash, what can you just give a layman's guide to what is AI, what is machine learning, and what is deep learning? Obviously for me, I understand them all, but I'm sure you would explain it a lot better than I would.
Well, yeah, and I think it's a good question, because whenever you see coverage of AI, people talk about AI and ML, and you wonder, well, why they're using two acronyms, and what does it all mean, and how are they different, and so on. So that's a good question. So what I like to do is what I call level setting, and explain what I mean when I talk about AI, because you can say AI to somebody and they'll have an idea in their head, but is it the same idea that I have and somebody else has? So let's level set. What do I mean by AI? It's a very big topic. It's a big research topic. It really took off from the mid 40s. And there were two main schools of thought. There was Marvin Minsky at MIT with symbolic AI. And then there was the connectionist school of thought. And that's where neural networks fit in, using data to drive designs that are inspired by the neural networks in the brain. So you have two very different camps. And for many, many years, as I mentioned, backpropagation came in '86, but prior to that, the ideas were very good in the connectionist world with the neural networks, but there wasn't really a lot of progress. And then backpropagation changed a lot of that. And we're still, when we look at deep learning today, we still see the repercussions of backpropagation of training very deep and large complex networks. So AI is all of that. And machine learning is a branch within AI, and the symbolic research is another branch. And then neural networks is a part of machine learning. So machine learning is all about using data, having designs that feed on data and come up with some intelligence, such as pattern recognition and so on. So they all fit within each other. So you've got AI, you've got machine learning as a branch within that, you've got neural networks as a branch within machine learning, and then you've got deep learning as a branch within neural networks. So the reason why people talk about AI and ML is because, especially with deep learning being the foremost ML technique of today, is that there's a lot of AI that's quite interesting and not neural network based. So Bayesian networks, and there's a lot of amazing research being done at Numenta as a nonprofit research organization that's doing some really interesting things. Jeff Hawkins has recently published his book on called the thousand brain model, and they're doing a lot of research on sparse networks. So it's not to my mind.
Stop you very quickly. What's a sparse network?
Okay, well, a sparse network is where
sparse. I beg your pardon.
A sparse versus a dense neural net. So with a dense neural net, you've got a lot of neurons. Everything's connected to everything else. It's a very, very dense network. With a sparse network, you may have thousands of neurons, but only a few of them are actually lit up. And that's actually how the brain works. The brain is very sparse, that when you get a signal coming in, maybe it's a visual response, the eye seeing something, only a few neurons fire at any given moment. And so the brain works in a very sparse manner. And so that research is looking at models that are sparse and have some amazing properties. So the reason I mention all of this is that AI isn't just about deep learning and deep neural networks. Amazing though, the research that, especially from DeepMind at Google, they're doing some great things, but there's a lot of other things. And I think also we need to look at the difference between AI research, especially as it's done in academia, and what is coming out of the research labs and going into industry. Because most of what we're focused on today is that AI that is being used in amazing things in applications where it's vision, audio, Amazon, Alexa, that sort of thing. So and this is using this technology, but is it going to get us to the point where people talk about general AI, intelligence in an artificial form that's equivalent to a human being? And I have to say that I would say that most people in academia will say that deep learning is great, but it's not going to get us to general AI. And so that's why there is a lot of interest in other methods and other pursuits, such as the work going on at Numenta. So that it's all about what you're trying to do, and what is the best type of technology to achieve that end. So there's a lot of great applications. For example, if you're trying to look at fault finding in a factory, looking at hearing the vibrations and detecting something different. If you're a seismologist, you're looking at patterns, trying to find interesting things in the data. If you're navigating a drone autonomously, or a train or a ferry between two ports, or even autonomous driving, as a lot of research, as you're aware, is trying to get to that point. So this technology has a lot of promise, can do a lot of things, but I think there's more to it, is what I'm trying to say when it comes to actually achieving the research aim. which is to eventually get to that holy grail where we can emulate the intelligence of a human being. And I'm not defining what that means, because that in itself is quite a complex question. So that's why you see AI and ML, because AI is more than just ML, and there are techniques in AI that's not necessarily machine learning. So hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you. So one is a branch of another, and then the other is goes deeper again. So that's cool. I mean, that makes perfect sense. But I think it also helps to clarify from a lay person's perspective, because as you say, AI is such a huge element. And I mean, as soon as you say AI, I go all iRobot and Isaac Asimov, the laws of robotics and all that.
Yes.
And by the way, you have a great name. If you ever want to go into science fiction, you're almost halfway there. So from that perspective, I think that's really useful.
Yes.
To sort of set the scene for what's going on. So obviously, AI has a huge, quite a long history, both in the science fiction, what could happen, and what actually has been done, neural networks, all these types of things. And when you were talking about the sparse networks, I thought, well, that makes sense that the brain would be like that, because you imagine if you were powering on everything, I mean, our heads would be really hot and probably explode.
Yes.
And some people say that my head sometimes is a bit like that anyway. But so from that perspective, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because you think, well, actually, you just divert, you put your lights on when there's something to do, and the rest of the time you just relax a little bit.
So the way, one of the things that people find is the way the neurons are connected in the brain is something called the small world model. So, there is this game we play. Is it the Kevin Bacon game? Is how many steps to Kevin Bacon, or
I've never played this. Where have
you never played this game? But how many steps does it take to get from yourself to a US president? These sort of games, and surprisingly, there are quite a small number of steps, like 6. So this is the small world model, and what's interesting,
degrees of separation.
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
So when you're looking at how the neurons are connected in the brain, it turns out that they emulate this small world model. So you have near neighbors are quite clustered, but then you've got a hub neuron that has a very long connection to another hub. So you have these clusters, these hubs, and you have a single neuron that will connect to the hub of another cluster. And that is a very small world type of model. So we see that kind of pattern happening in the brain. So these ideas are sort of feeding into sparse models, and then you also have a spiking neural net. So this is something that's in the last couple of years, we're seeing startups produce hardware accelerators that are using spiking neural nets. So the most neural networks that people work with have neurons that have continuous values. But in the brain, when an event happens, it triggers a spark in a neuron, and that spike travels along the axon and travels across synapses from one neuron to another. And that's a traveling spike through time. And so spiking neural networks emulate that type of characteristic. And it's been, the spiking neural networks have been around when I got interested. I mentioned 86. They were around in 86. But it's taken a long time for people to actually do something useful with them. And all of a sudden, in the last 2 years, we're seeing a whole burst of startups coming on the scene and producing chips that are based on spiking neural nets. So it's really exciting that they finally cracked it and are able to train neural networks with these spikes. So that's fascinating. They tend to be used for edge computing, where it's very low power, and there's analog models, so they're not just digital. So when we talk about neural networks, we're really simulating an idea, an algorithm on a computer. And And we need accelerators like GPUs and FPGAs to enable these systems to compute and train in a reasonable amount of time. But they're really just simulations. They're simulating the idea of a neural net. That's what the algorithm is. But analog models, they actually embody the neural network physically. And you have spiking neural nets with analog models. So you have all these different combinations. You can have spiking neural nets on a digital simulation, or you can do it analog. So you got all these combinations, and all these startups are, trying out these different ideas. And so there's a lot of burst of creativity going on at the moment. It's something that we've been writing about at GigaOm. I'm just finishing a report on edge AI accelerators that is looking at these spiking neural nets. They're called neuromorphic models. And so we're covering that space. And as I mentioned, edge AI, where you're doing inference mode. So inference mode is when you're getting a result, you're using the neural network in production, you're feeding it in data, and then you want to see what result you get after you've done all the training. So neuromorphic is very hot for that. And it's very low power, and it's often very tightly connected with the sensor. And then you got other chips that do more heavy duty work. So the sort of Alexa, where you're looking for a command word, that would be done by, for example, a neuromorphic chip would do that. Very low power, very small chip, and it just does that function, looking for a trigger alert, a command word. And then you've got the bigger chips that do more heavy processing, and so it's so I would say that I think when we talk about AI today in practice with the technology that we see around us, like being able to talk to an Alexa or Google Home or one of those devices, or eventually we're going to be talking to our washing machines. so
I already have a smart dishwasher, by the way.
Oh, that's good.
I haven't worked out how to do it. Come on, let's face it. I've got a teenage son. I can't even get the dish in the dishwasher. Now that's the revolution, is when we can actually get something, that the little robot that will pick everything up.
That's right.
But I had a fun idea.
Yes.
Because you kept saying Alexa, and I was waiting for her to pop up, because
she's not in my room. She's in the
mine
house.
Is. You can have mine.
And she hasn't woken up.
Oh, here we go. I thought we could ask her what she thinks artificial intelligence is. That would be fun, wouldn't it?
All right.
Alexa,
here's something I found on the web.
What?
According to turnpaperwarehouse.com, artificial intelligence, AI, is the branch of computer science concerned with making computers behave like humans.
Well, that's one view. I wouldn't say that's definitive.
Ooh, now this is controversy. AI specialist disagrees with Alexa on what AI is. I mean, I feel there's a story there. I feel that there could be can we have like a bit like a face-off between human and Alexa? Actually, but this is the problem, isn't it? Because she can only pick up information
that someone's written
out there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So she doesn't hold her own terms. She is just searching.
Yeah. I mean, researchers talk about behaving like a human. So do you, when you want to be human-like, do you want to be truly human-like, or do you just want to be rational? Do you want to think like a human, or do you want to be able to act like a human? So these are different dimensions to what we might expect out of an artificial intelligence. And they all play into, perhaps they're all part of, ultimately, we want all of those things. Or I don't know. I mean, do we want an artificial machine to be so human that it's irrational? I don't know.
Well, it's fine, because I'm happy to be the role model for that one. Follow me, people. I'll show path to irrationality and impulse. Here we go. But I think it's an interesting thing because
Yes,
you know,
yes.
somebody I mean, I'm already now when I go to my mum's and I work there, I kind of turn to Alexa to go, Alexa, turn the light on, or to Alexa, put the radio on, or whatever
Yes.
it is. She's now going to ask me, what do you want me to do? Because she keeps asking me questions too quick to react. How quickly we get used to them being around.
Yes, and
So
I think that
it won't be long before I'll be quite happy when there's a little robot doing my dusting.
yes, I'm sure we'll get to that point
and stuff like that. So,
and we have vacuum robots, and I think that's quite a successful little market of its own, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of this technology. One of the difficulties, for example, with having a robot, I think Elon Musk, was it Elon Musk or Apple were talking about creating a robot for the home. But one of the difficulties is being safe around a robot because
I
obviously
trip over it all the time, and
I trip over the Hoover.
Or something like that.
So they need to be soft and flexible if you do collide with them, and I think that's something that the researchers are working on. So I'm sure at some point we'll see more of these things in our home. Yeah.
For sure. Well, it'd be interesting. I mean, they're infiltrating already, aren't they? I mean,
yes.
Worked up. You know, you got the lights on it. I get all my music through it. I haven't connected it to the telly yet, but you know, it's not going to be long before that will be voice
everything.
comms.
Yes, we'll have more connected technology for sure. Yeah. At the moment, I have about 5 different controls for my TV, which is quite ridiculous.
Oh, no, that's showing off now. I've only got 2.
I'm not showing off. It's a pain. I want to have one. I want to have one intelligent control.
What is going on with your telly that you've got 5 controls? What's that?
I have a Roku box. I have a DVD Blu-ray player. I've got a BT recorder. All of these boxes have different controllers.
All mod cons.
And I really just want one to control all of it. And then the television has its controls. So not forgetting that.
You're better than me because I was away for like a night and my son managed to lose.
Yeah, you lose a control. One of the grandchildren has sat on
nightmare. There's nothing worse because I mean, tellies today you can't actually do anything manually with them. You can just about turn them on.
Yeah,
and that's it. It's like
that's right. So yeah, so we've got all this great technology, but we want simplification. So nobody in the house can work out how to get my hi-fi system working. So this is where this is where technology is too complex. So somebody said if you need to read a manual, it's technology. When it's just part of the background and you use it with ease, then it's part of life, and that's what technology needs to migrate to. If you need to read a manual, then it's no good.
Well, the only reason you read a manual, and this is obviously everybody go, well, she's definitely not a technologist, is when I can't work something out myself.
Yes. But that's it. That's a failure. I think that's a failure in somebody has designed a wonderful box that does some wonderful thing, but they've done it to the way they want to design it, not to the way that we want to interact with it. And I think there's a big disconnect between what is made available to us and how we really want to make use of those objects. We want ease of use and so I think there's still that. There's a lot more to be done. I think for technology to be done right.
It's going to be AI, isn't it?
And it applies to AI, I'm sure. AI may help actually in.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Yes,
that sort of like make up for the lack of human intelligence by artificial intelligence.
Well, I don't think it's lack of human intelligence. I think it's lack of understanding by designers as to actually how to make our life easier instead of more complicated. And I think that's part of the the problem.
I certainly would like it so that it was very simple for my mum to use. But we're coming up against things which are just partly to do with her age and her ability to see things. And obviously technology, she's never, I mean, she has a mobile phone, but she can just about work out how to phone somebody on it. But I think that's increasingly due to eyesight rather than intelligence.
Yes.
But voice command stuff for people who, can't see very well or don't understand the technology, if you make it super simple.
Yes, and I saw a device advertised that you can scan on a page and it will read it to you. So people who are just learning the language, and that would be a great help. And we see more and more useful things around us.
Well, we hope so, but then again,
yes.
All you need is I did solve my TV problem. I bought 2, maybe 3 spare remote controls. So on the basis that
you're going to lose one or two.
If you lose one, your life does not go on hold. Because obviously this is lockdown. I mean, this is serious stuff. You can't go out and have a social life. You were relying on TV-based entertainment, unfortunately.
Yes.
But anyway, but that's good. I mean, we'll see the future moving in that direction. So you've talked a little bit about startups, and obviously startups is something that we are all very passionate about. And obviously GigaOm is very much looking at the innovative space of a technology. So startups are obviously going to be an important part of that. And you talked about the ones who are doing chip acceleration,
that's right, yes,
which is being utilized in edge computing.
Yes.
So and it is something that we've seen, and I've actually talked to some of your colleagues about in previous podcasts, is that we are starting to see AI become a big part of things like cybersecurity, things that can be automated, things where you can maybe take a human out of part of the solution and give it some intelligence.
Yes. So
thinking primarily.
Yes.
And then, free up the human beings to do stuff once that's that first level, like what I call almost first touch support or first touch part of a product.
Yes.
Ability.
So there's some very fascinating technology. I in fact, the call I've just had before yourself, Rose, was with a very interesting company using photons to accelerate something called the Fourier transform. But the reason why it's so fascinating.
I'm glad we've kept with a really simple topic for me there, Michael.
But I the reason I want to mention this
it's one of those things.
No, seriously. I know it's technical, but I the reason I want to mention this is that you have secure data in storage, right?
Yeah.
You can send encrypted data as a communication. WhatsApp, for example, as you know, encrypts data.
Yeah.
But what happens when you actually want to do things with the data? You have to decrypt it to do the things you want to do. Mm-hmm. And then when you got a result, you encrypt it and then send it. But while it's decrypted, it's vulnerable. People can snoop and look at the data, and it's not secure. So there is something called fully homomorphic encryption, which allows you to work with encrypted data. And for example, you can multiply 2 bits of encrypted data and get a result that's meaningful, but still encrypted. So it's completely hidden. And that's what fully homomorphic encryption does. But the trouble is, so the breakthrough around in that field was around 2009. So it's relatively recent. There's been an explosion of work taking this technology forward. But the biggest problem with fully homomorphic encryption, FHE, is that it's very slow to do those computations when it's encrypted. Mm-hmm. And this is where accelerators come in and make it possible to do this calculation in real time. So this company I was speaking to, Optalsys, they're UK based actually, and there's another company called Konami in the US. So suddenly you've now got these chip companies that are able to accelerate this technology. So this is something that's going to happen in the near future, where you'll be able to secure data, not just in storage and in flight, but also during compute, completely secure all the time. And that's going to be a massive, massive technology.
That's pretty crazy.
It is.
I mean,
it is amazing.
Storage and security are areas that I'm very familiar with.
Yes.
She says after pretending she's totally technically illiterate. But and we've done a lot around encryption to tapes, encryption, in transit,
yes.
at rest,
yes.
dealing with people who were working with recovering data that had been at the bottom of the ocean on tapes, since World War II. All sorts of interesting stuff like that. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
But the thing is, obviously, those are the two states that encryption has happened at rest and in transit. That's what people have worried about. Obviously, in transit was the first one to worry about, with the ability to intercept transmissions. But during compute, it's bonkers.
So it is bonkers. But part of the problem is that the thinking with security now is that you'd have to assume the bad guys are in your network. That's the level of thinking today. Is that you need to do the right things on the assumption that the bad guys are in your system, and how do you protect? So this kind of technology, working with encrypted data and being able to work with it without having to decrypt it, it's a massive breakthrough. There are some other technologies that are adjacent to this. There's something called confidential computing. This is the chip companies like Intel and AMD and others are working on, where they have trusted execution environments actually on the chip. And they have these enclaves where you can send your confidential data into these enclaves, decrypt it, work with it, and then it comes out of the enclave encrypted. But it's not quite as fully secure as FHE. So it's horses for courses. You choose the right type of technology for your needs. But for the holy grail of absolute security, FHE is really there. And we're getting nearer to that point. We're a few years away. So these companies that I mentioned are just in the process of building out these chips, and it'll be a few years before they'll be out in the market. But you heard it here. In a few years' time, you heard it here first.
Well, that's what we're talking about. I mean, we talked before we started recording about the context for this, that the tech on fire stuff was looking back over the last, say, 10 years, because the awards are 10 years old. And then we thought, if we look back 10, can we look forward 10?
Yes,
and
indeed.
that's exactly what you're saying. I mean, obviously, if they're alive and kicking, and I guess even if they've got prototype, they can come in and put their hat in the ring for the award. So don't be shy, guys, there with this incredible encryption, with the whatnot. Don't be shy. Put it out there. But there are lots of these types of things that are happening in security right now, that are being used right now within sort of automation and such like. So very exciting times.
Yes. So this is definitely a watch this space, this technology, secure in compute.
Oh, it's some new buzzwords there for me to hold on to there. And also a fight with Alexa, who decided that she wanted to get involved in the conversation. I think she's taken umbrage that you didn't like her definition of AI, and she's now going to she's getting a bit feisty and has decided to get in on the act here somewhere along the line. But I mean, it's all out there. And so the other thing I was thinking about, because this has been a bit of a sort of a futuristic topic, and there's been talks about encryption, and I can't see how there's not an element of AI in this whole area, and everybody who knows this in depth will probably go, of course it is, or of course it isn't. But there's been a lot of talk about quantum computing.
Oh yes.
So do you see that AI is going to be at the forefront of that? Is that going to be just something that will run in parallel, and they'll kind of
so
mosey along together?
Yeah. So one of the things about quantum computers is they can do certain types of computations incredibly fast. So they're not going to replace our classical computers, but for certain types of computation, they really are in a different realm. So the question is, when you look at our AI models, is there a way where a quantum computer can do something useful, whether it's accelerating the computation or coming up with a intriguing AI model that the quantum computer can take things to in new and interesting directions. So I've seen papers being published on quantum AI, quantum computing based AI. So it's definitely, people are looking at these ideas, and at the moment we just have emulators, and we've got quantum computers that can only run a few qubits, but I think we're all expecting at some point that we'll get some quantum supremacy type of computers, quantum computers that can do things that classical computers cannot do at all. And I think people talk about needing about 1,000 qubits to do that. So I think once we get those sort of computers out there, I think we'll see more of this research. And so I expect to see AI being run on quantum computers. Yeah.
Well, it kind of needs, it all fits together. And it's an interesting thing that I was thinking about there. What you were talking about, that's the level of security, because obviously we're going to want to secure data that's being processed by, just because you want it fast, you don't want it securely, right? You're not going to compromise one for the other here.
Yes.
And it almost feels like it's a bit like the safety belt in a car. You can push more sensitive data through if you know you've got this encryption during the processing part.
Yes.
And because the quantum is so fast, you kind of are throttling back and forth. One
pushes
really fast, the other one will obviously by its nature slow it down, but overall you're going faster.
Yes. So quantum computers definitely have turned the whole cryptographic community upside down, if one can put it in those terms. But it doesn't. But there's good news as well, because there are technologies like FHE that, if they're done in a certain way, so lattice-based FHE is known to be quantum proof. So this is one of the things that DARPA in the US is running this competition for FHE accelerators. They all need to be quantum proof, because basically these are going to become the next standards in cryptography, international standards, and they need to be quantum proof. If it's not quantum proof, okay, it's not going to be of any use. So there are these technologies that are understood to the best of our knowledge. So you're getting into the realm of NP complete systems, and if you can show one example that can break this type of restriction, then all the others are broken as well. So to the best of our knowledge, these lattice systems are quantum proof, but you can't guarantee that these things may change in the future. But to the best of our knowledge today, these lattice-based FHE systems will be quantum proof. The quantum computer will not be able to break it.
Well, interestingly enough, the NSA kind of agrees with you, the American National Security Agency. Although when I heard the headline, I was a little bit, moment. And I thank to our friends at the Register here. So apparently there is an FAQ from the NSA about quantum computing and post-quantum cryptography, which says and I'm quoting from the article in the Register, not from the PDF itself, has to produce requirements today for systems that can be used for many decades in the future. With that in mind, the agency came up with some predictions, but generally speaking is that they don't know when or even if a quantum computer will be able to break today's public key encryption.
Right. So as long as they're using some of the known, to the best of our current knowledge, known quantum proof, as long as you're using those kind of standards, you're safe. But some of the older standards will be broken. So that's just one of the hazards with this new technology.
Well, it shall be interesting how it all plays out, because
yes.
really, proof is in the pudding with these things, isn't it? If it holds up under the rigor of attacks, then it's all good. Let's keep our fingers crossed on that one.
Yes.
So what else have we got to look forward to in the realms of AI over the years? What are we going to see as our entrants,
Well, I think
we'll along and with their entries, pop their entries in the virtual box.
Yes.
And get them looked at.
So I think if we're talking about practical AI in the world, in the real world, as opposed to the efforts in research. So from this sort of practical point of view, I think we'll see a lot more. We talked about gadgets and trying to make our life simpler at home. I think we'll see a lot more AI in the home, in the office, in the factory. There's going to be a lot of edge AI. So edge AI and inference mode AI is all about putting AI into everyday use. And with 5G rollout, there's going to be more connectivity. There's going to be a lot more data being processed, some of it locally, some of it on the cloud. Just, in the next 10 years, we're going to see more chips embedded in objects and devices, and they'll be more intelligent for sure. You'll be able to, the human machine interaction will improve. They'll be doing more advanced type of analysis and computation, and hopefully, it'll be a safer world as well, because all this effort to bring AI into our transport is all about safety. So we should be living in a better world as a result of this technology.
Let's hope so.
Yes.
And anything else you want to add on that, on innovation, startups and AI over the coming?
Yeah, I mean, stay tuned to what we do at GigaOm, because I'm covering this space and I'm talking to a lot of startups. And so there's a lot of amazing ingenuity out there, and we love to cover it. And so check out our reports.
Fantastic. And I know that a couple of your colleagues have stepped in as judges. So if you have the time, we'd love you to help judge who's going forward on the AI.
I'd be delighted. Yeah.
So so that's another way for people to get your attention. Get their entry in front of you, because then you can have a look and go, oh, that's interesting. I'd like to find out a little bit more about that. So that's good. Well, brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, Michael. Just to wrap up, it's the Tech on Fire podcast that we've been doing with the team at GigaOm, which is just mind-blowing stuff that we've covered. A real smorgasbord of different technologies. So thank you very much again, Michael, for coming and joining us. And you've been listening to the Tech Trailblazers Tech on Fire podcast and video cast. My name is Rose Ross, and I'll be coming back to you with regards to this very soon. But in the meantime, get your entries in if you're a startup. We want to get you in front of Michael, other guys from GigaOm, and other amazing judges who are all keeping an eye out on what you're up to. And also you can find out more about that at www.techtrailblazers.com. You can follow us on Twitter at techtrailblaze, and you can also find us on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Rose. It's been a pleasure.